Less than 60 miles northeast of downtown Los Angeles, something has been building for more than 160 years. Not a storm, not a flood, something slower, something quieter, and far more dangerous than either. Coiled spring, buried beneath the most densely populated region in the western United States, loading energy into the rock with every passing year, tightening with every decade, waiting. The southern San Andreas fault and the San Jacinto fault have been accumulating stress since the last major rupture in 1857. That was 169 years ago. In geological terms, that is a very long time to wait. 3 weeks ago, a team of researchers from the University of Bern, the University of Hawaii, the United States Geological Survey, and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography published a study that changed the way scientists think about what is coming. They built a physics-based computer model. They fed it 1,000 years of earthquake history, radiocarbon dating of displaced sediments, tree-ring records, geological evidence going back to the year 1000. They ran the simulation forward to the present day. Then they looked at how much stress has accumulated in the rock beneath Southern California. What they found was not what anyone wanted to see. Stress levels on multiple segments of the southern San Andreas and San Jacinto faults are now at or above the highest values recorded at any point in the last 1,000 years. Not the highest in a generation, not the highest in a century, the highest in a millennium. The lead author of the study, Dr. Lillian Burkhard of the University of Bern, put it in plain language. The system, she said, is in a critically loaded state. More than 160 years have passed since the last major rupture. The stress that would normally be released in large earthquakes has continued to accumulate. It is now at unprecedented levels. And then she said something that no seismologist has said publicly about this fault system before. She said the conditions are right for both faults to rupture simultaneously. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what the San Andreas fault actually is, and what it sits next to. The San Andreas is the boundary between two of the largest tectonic plates on Earth. The Pacific Plate to the west, carrying Los Angeles, is grinding northward past the North American Plate at roughly 50 millimeters per year. Where these two plates meet, the rock on either side is locked, unable to slide freely. Stress accumulates in the locked zones the way pressure builds in a compressed spring. When the stress finally exceeds the strength of the rock holding the plates together, the lock breaks. The plates lurch forward. The ground shakes. That is an earthquake. The southern San Andreas runs through the Coachella Valley, past Palm Springs, through San Bernardino and Riverside counties, and north toward Los Angeles. It has not produced a major rupture since 1857, when the Fort Tejon earthquake tore a 225-mile gash through central California and caused the ground to shift 30 feet in some locations. The shaking lasted nearly 2 minutes. At the time, Southern California had a population of a few thousand people. Today, that same corridor contains 20 million. The San Jacinto fault runs parallel to the San Andreas, 20 miles to the east, through the same densely populated region. In some assessments, it is even more active than the San Andreas, producing more frequent smaller earthquakes and accumulating stress in a pattern that seismologists have been watching closely for decades. These two faults meet at a junction called the Cajon Pass, a mountain gateway northeast of Los Angeles that carries the main highway connecting Los Angeles to Las Vegas, along with critical gas pipelines, electrical transmission lines, and fiber optic cables that serve as the backbone of Southern California's infrastructure. Dr. Burkhard's team identified this junction as something they had never had a name for before. They called it an earthquake gate. The earthquake gate concept is what makes the study different from everything that came before it. For decades, seismologists modeled the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults as separate systems. A rupture on one might trigger smaller earthquakes on the other, but a joint rupture, both faults breaking simultaneously, the seismic energy crossing the Cajon Pass junction and spreading across both systems at the same time, was considered possible but unlikely. The new model changes that. It found that the gate opens or closes depending on one specific condition. How closely aligned the stress levels on the two faults are at the moment of rupture. When stress on both sides of the pass reaches similarly high levels, the gate opens. A rupture on one fault can cross the junction and cascade into the other. The model then looked at current conditions. Stress on both the southern San Andreas and the San Jacinto is at historically high levels. The two systems are approaching the configuration that, in the historical record, has preceded the largest joint ruptures. The gate is not closed. It is not locked. It is sitting at the threshold. Dr. Burkhard was careful to say that this is not a prediction. No one can tell you when the earthquake will happen. But she said something that carries more weight than a prediction. She said that the conditions that would allow a joint rupture to occur are the conditions that exist today. Matthew Weingarten, a geologist at San Diego State University who was not involved in the study, reviewed findings and told reporters, "We talk loosely about faults being overdue, but it is important to see a physics-based estimate that the system is sitting at a 1,000-year high. 1,000 years. That is the number that doesn't leave you." In 1812, an earthquake crossed the Cajon Pass and tore through both fault systems simultaneously. The Wrightwood earthquake, estimated at magnitude 7.5, ruptured through the junction and spread damage from north of Los Angeles through San Bernardino, Riverside, and the Coachella Valley at the same time, caused 40 deaths. In a region with almost no population, the same rupture today would move through a corridor containing the cities of San Bernardino, Riverside, Redlands, Fontana, Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga, and the eastern edges of the Los Angeles metropolitan area, all at once. Dr. Burkhard's team modeled what a joint rupture crossing Cajon Pass would look like under current conditions. The magnitude range they projected was 7.4 to 7.8, a far larger area affected than any single fault event, a far larger number of buildings in the damage zone, a far greater demand on emergency services. And then there is the infrastructure at the pass itself. The highway through Cajon Pass, the main corridor between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, would be severed. The gas pipelines carrying natural gas into Los Angeles from the east would rupture at the pass. The electrical transmission lines crossing the junction, lines that carry power from the desert generating stations into the metropolitan grid, would fail. In the first minutes after a joint rupture, Southern California would be simultaneously cut off from its primary road corridor, its gas supply, and a significant portion of its electrical power. All at once, all at the same junction. There is a specific kind of destruction that follows a major Southern California earthquake that gets less attention than the shaking itself, but that kills more people and causes more long-term damage than the ground movement alone. Fire. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake, magnitude 7.9, killed approximately 3,000 people. The shaking itself was responsible for a fraction of those deaths. The fires that broke out afterward, ignited by ruptured gas lines, overturned stoves, downed electrical lines, in a city with no water pressure because the water mains had been destroyed, burned for 3 days and destroyed 28,000 buildings. San Francisco, 1906, was a city of 400,000. The gas infrastructure was primitive. The density was low by modern standards. Los Angeles today has 4 million people in the city limits and 13 million in the greater metropolitan area. The gas distribution network beneath the city is one of the most extensive in the United States. 13,000 miles of pipeline running beneath streets, neighborhoods, and residential areas throughout the region. A major rupture on the southern San Andreas would break those pipelines in thousands of locations simultaneously. Gas would escape into structures, into crawl spaces, into the soil. Electrical lines would fall. Ignition sources would be everywhere. Scientists projected that a southern San Andreas rupture would ignite 1,600 fires in Los Angeles County within the first hour. Fire departments would be overwhelmed within minutes. Water pressure would be unavailable in large sections of the city, because the water mains that carry the pressure needed to fight fires would have ruptured along with everything else. The fires would burn for days, in some neighborhoods, weeks. Here is what that looks like on the ground. A neighborhood in the eastern San Fernando Valley loses gas pressure at the main line the moment the fault ruptures. Gas begins escaping into crawl spaces beneath houses. A block away, a downed power line makes contact with dry brush. The ignition happened before any fire crew has received a dispatch call. By the time the first engine responds, 3 houses are already burning. The crew calls for water. The hydrant runs dry. The water main beneath the street ruptured at the same moment the gas line did. The crew calls for a tanker. Every tanker in the district is already committed. The fire grows. That scenario, multiplied by 1,600 simultaneous ignition points across Los Angeles County, is what the scientists mean when they say the fires would burn for days. And that is the single fault scenario, the one scientists have been planning for. It does not include the San Jacinto. It does not include a joint rupture crossing the earthquake gate. The study published 3 weeks ago is not the only piece of research pointing toward elevated risk in Southern California right now. A separate study from Oregon State University found evidence that the northern San Andreas Fault and the Cascadia subduction zone, the megathrust fault running off the coast of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, may be partially synchronized. Large earthquakes on one system appear to increase the probability of large earthquakes on the other within a short time window. Researchers called it the double West Coast earthquake threat. A major rupture on the southern San Andreas does not exist in isolation. It exists within a fault network that spans the entire length of the American West Coast, and the pieces of that network appear to be more connected to each other than scientists previously understood. In Seattle, a hidden network of secondary faults running beneath the city was found earlier this year to be far more active than scientists had realized. The western edge of the North American plate is not stressed in one place. It is stressed everywhere. From the southern end of the San Andreas in the Salton Sea to the northern end of the Cascadia Fault off the coast of British Columbia. Paper after paper published in the past 6 months describes the same thing. Historically unprecedented stress levels. Across the entire Pacific North American plate boundary, Los Angeles has been preparing for the major earthquake it knows is coming for decades. The city has spent billions of dollars retrofitting concrete buildings, reinforcing bridges, and strengthening the water system infrastructure. Thousands of older soft-story apartment buildings have been identified and many have been retrofitted under a mandatory ordinance. None of that preparation is wasted, but it is designed around a single fault rupture. A 7.8 on the southern San Andreas, with the San Jacinto remaining quiet. What the new study introduces is the possibility that the system does not produce a single fault event, that the earthquake gate at Cajon Pass opens, that the rupture crosses the junction and involves both systems, that what hits Southern California is not the earthquake California has been preparing for, but something larger, affecting a wider area, with more simultaneous infrastructure failures, more simultaneous ignition sources, more simultaneous demand on emergency services than any prior planning scenario has ever modeled. The chance of a magnitude 6.7 or higher earthquake on the southern San Andreas in the next few decades is already above 50%, according to previous analysis. That number is for a single fault event. The new study does not revise that probability upward. What it does is change the shape of what that earthquake might look like when it arrives. It might arrive as a 7.8 on the San Andreas, or it might arrive as something that starts on the San Andreas, crosses the gate at Cajon Pass, and becomes something that has not happened in this region since 1812. In a region that, in 1812, had almost no one living in it. The researchers who published the study 3 weeks ago were explicit about what their findings are and what they are not. This is not a prediction. No one can tell you the date, the time, or the exact magnitude. Seismology does not work that way and may never work that way. What the study provides is a physics-based estimate of current conditions, a rigorous, quantitative picture of how much stress has accumulated, where it has accumulated, and what historical patterns suggest about what happens when the accumulation reaches this level. What history suggests is that this level of stress does not persist indefinitely. The San Andreas has been storing the energy of 169 years of tectonic motion in locked rock beneath one of the most populated corridors in the United States. The San Jacinto has been loading alongside it. The Cajon Pass sits between them, a gate that opens under the right conditions, and the model says the conditions today resemble the conditions that, in the historical record, have preceded the largest joint ruptures this region has ever produced. Dr. Burkhard closed her comments to reporters with a line that California emergency managers have been quietly repeating since the paper was published. What we can say is that the system is critically stressed, and that information matters. It matters for the 20 million people who live in the corridor these two faults run through. It matters for the infrastructure that connects Southern California to the rest of the country. And it matters because the one thing the model cannot tell you, the one variable that no physics-based simulation can calculate, is how much time is left before the gate opens. The Fort Tejon earthquake of 1857 happened at 8:24 in the morning. Most people in the small settlements along the fault were still indoors. The shaking lasted nearly 2 minutes. Cattle fell to the ground. Trees were uprooted. The ground opened in some locations and then closed again. There were very few people in the way. The fault released its energy into nearly empty land. When it releases again, and the physics say it will, the land will not be empty. It will be Los Angeles. It will be San Bernardino. It will be Riverside and Rancho Cucamonga and Fontana and Hemet and Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley. It will be 20 million people, 13,000 miles of gas pipeline, 1,600 potential ignition sources, and one highway through a mountain pass that was just destroyed at the earthquake gate. The system is critically stressed. The gate is at the threshold, and the clock has been running for 169 years.